Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Raving Patients podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao, and today I'm talking to someone who I actually was on their podcast episode yesterday. We got to know each other yesterday, so I'm excited to have her on my podcast. I met her a couple years ago at the Speakers Consulting Network meeting, and once again, we met at Smiles at Sea a few weeks ago in Miami. I actually saw her as a competitor in the Dentistry's Got Talent content, and she blew me away with her story. Today's guest is Angela Mulrooney, who will share with you parts of her story, hopefully. But Angela, welcome to the Raving Patients podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about unleashing your authentic brand, which is the title of the podcast. Angela, why don't you... well, first off, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your life in Nicaragua now as you move from Canada. But why don't you tell people a little bit about who you are, what you do, a little bit about your background in the space.
Sure. So I used to be a dentist. I had bought this practice in the worst part of town and turned it from this broken down practice where, things were falling apart in people's mouths as well as the environment to a practice where people were coming for phobic treatment, so IV sedation, full mouth rehabilitation, sleep apnea, as well as implants. And unfortunately, after building this beautiful, perfect practice with the perfect team, I ended up with a condition called focal dystonia, which killed my ability to practice. So 8.5 years into my career, I had to figure out how I was going to pivot. I tried to keep my dream practice alive, and I decided in 2015, when the oil crisis hit Calgary, which is where my practice was, that it was time to peace out and move on to other things. So I stepped away from dentistry for a year, went back to dancing full-time professionally, and built a dance company, which for some people felt like I had run away to join the circus because they didn't know that that was a big part of what I did on a regular basis. And then after that, I decided to step into the business coaching thing, because when I had my practice, I went through a lawsuit with my team. I went through the owner dying halfway through our purchase. I went through all different kinds of things, global economic crisis when I first opened it. So I figured perhaps those experiences I'd been through, I could use to help other people. So I launched what we used to be called My Business Doctor Inc. It's now Unleashing Dentistry's Potential. And to get that company noticed, I used social media. So I hopped on LinkedIn, started studying the algorithm, started to play with different kinds of content. And in the first year of using LinkedIn to get the business coaching company noticed, I went from 200 to 12,000 dental industry followers. And suddenly people were like, how did you do that? And they started asking me to do it for them. So I took on a few of my favorite pet clients and started doing their social media. And then it grew to a point where I couldn't handle it myself anymore. And so Unleashing Influence, the social media company for credible professionals, was born in January 2020, exactly 2 months before the pandemic shut down Canada. And I thought we were just going to take a massive nosedive because of that, but instead we skyrocketed and grew exponentially. And now we have an amazing company, amazing team that helps the influencers that we work with to really unleash their authentic brands, get noticed for their expertise, and really drive sales for their businesses. And a lot of people are actually outside of dentistry in that company. We do work with a few dentists, but a lot of our people are like massive health tech companies as well as healthcare entrepreneurs.
Interesting. You said something that kind of triggered is that you started doing it for yourself and had exponential growth, and people wanted you to help them. And it reminds me of how with me, and I told you this yesterday, that I was helping, doing it for myself in my practice with reviews, and how important reviews were to growing my practice. And people were asking me for help as well, and that's how I got into my space as well. So there's a lot of similarities in our careers there. I did not know anything about the reason why you got out of dentistry. I did not realize that you called it focal dystonia, I think you said. I did not realize that I think they call that the yips, don't they? Isn't that what that's called?
I don't know. I've never heard that. It's sometimes called writer's cramp. A few different names for it.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things. I think one of my friends had that, and he always said he had the yips. I'll have to look that up, but I think that's what it is. But I did not know that about you. So I apologize that happened. That's terrible that someone has to go through that after they spend all the years. Yeah. But the nice thing is you recovered. You found another calling, as I like to say, and you're obviously passionate about that. So congratulations to you. So we're going to spend some time talking about social media, and I think it's a very, I want to say unknown, or it's a very misunderstood space. Because as I mentioned to you, I was one of the very first dentists to have a Facebook page. I still remember, and it's very different now. Social media is entirely different. How much people always ask me, how much ROI are you going to get from Facebook if you don't pay for it? And when you pay for it, it's not social media, it's really paid advertising. So why don't you kind of start off by letting the listeners know, what your feeling is, about, hey, this is social media, this is paid advertising, the differences, and kind of where you stand in that position.
Right. So the kind of social media that I work with people on is the organic side of it. So this is, if you're looking at like Google tactics, SEO versus SEM, that's what organic is versus paid advertising on social media. So this is really creating your thought leadership content. This is creating your assets that will never go away. Like the minute you stop paying for advertising, your tactic is done. Whereas this is creating a body of work that people can refer back to see your expertise. It really showcases you in a very dynamic way that allows people to get to know not only your expertise, but they get to see you on a regular basis. So they get to see how you transform physically, how your opinions change. You're always caught up with the times, because if you're getting on there regularly, during the pandemic, we had a lot of people who were getting on social media and addressing the issue. And that was a huge benefit for the practice. The ones who kind of stuck their head in the sand and hid from it came out weaker because of it. But the social media side of things really allows you to constantly show who you are. And it's very different than a website, because a website is just that perfect snapshot, whereas the social media is always evolving with you, which is a beautiful thing.
Gotcha. So talk to me about, where do you see somebody who is saying, okay, let's take someone who has a new practice. What sites are most influential now? I mean, there's so many different sites. I mean, it seems like there's a new hot one. Clubhouse is as a form of social media, although it's not your typical. But there's so many different companies that are coming out with social media. Where does somebody who's starting out need to kind of place themselves? And then we'll get into the more of the things that we wanted to talk about, because that's a question I get all the time: is where do they begin?
It really depends on the kind of audience that you're going after. Like if you're going after families, Facebook, getting into the mommies and daddies groups there is going to be a useful thing. Instagram, if you're going after more of the millennials, that could be a great thing, especially if you're showcasing the aesthetic side of what you do. If you're going after high-level professionals, LinkedIn can be an amazing place to go to. So you really have to dig deep into who you want in your practice, especially if you're building out a brand new practice. I know it's easy to try to be everything to everybody, but you probably have a bit of a gift for working with a certain type of population. And if that's what makes you happy to go to work every day, profile those people. What do you know about them? Are they male? Are they female? Are they of a certain age range? Do they have a certain education level? Are they from a certain part of the city? The more information you can gather on them, the better you are educated to actually make the right choice of which platform to go after. And you may want to hedge your bets on a couple of them. I wouldn't go more than two, because social media takes a tremendous amount of time, and you don't want to be trying to spread yourself too thin, because then you're not going to get much inroads anywhere. It's better to try and own one platform, but if you're not sure based on your demographic, I would hedge your bets between a couple of them.
Which I agree with 100%. There are people who try to go into, all in, and they thin themselves out too much. If you learn how to dominate a couple of platforms, I think you'll be better off. I think going back to what you said, I think somebody needs to know which serves their demographics the best. So 100% professionals are on LinkedIn. If you're dealing with kids, you want the moms are on Facebook. If you're a cosmetic dentist, Instagram may be the best one, because it's a very visual tool. Pinterest may be of interest to some people, because Pinterest is of a lot of women who have higher income levels is generally what that is. I'm not sure what Twitter plays a role, if anything, but I think that's the first thing someone needs to do when they're listening to this is pick which social media tools you need to use. And then once you pick those, then you go all in on those and start creating content so people start listening to you. I think that's the advice you'd give somebody, correct?
Absolutely. And with the content, a lot of people they'll hire a company and just get them to do it for them. And so they get all this really generic stuff with their logo plopped onto it that can be recycled across a lot of different dental practices. And it feels good that you're doing something, but when you actually look at the numbers of what is being engaged with, that stuff doesn't get you engagement. Like Happy Easter with a couple of little teeth with little bunny ears, super cute, but it's not actually showcasing anything about your practice. Whereas if your team gets on there and maybe you do like a boomerang where everyone's excited and repeating the movement, that's going to get way more engagement because it showcases some personality behind what your practice is, instead of just kind of being lazy and using a company to just place that generic stuff so that you got something. But sometimes something is worse than nothing.
Well, something is better than sometimes something is better than nothing, but other times it can actually hurt you. And you talk about engagement, it's rules of in terms of rules of ROI. It should be ROE, rules of engagement. Okay, because there's certain types of engagements you want. Okay, you want shares, you want comments, and you want likes. That's how you determine engagement when it comes to a post. And what's really interesting, I'll tell you a really interesting story. So I remember it was last January, prior to the pandemic, and I was working with a practice they were in Georgia, and they were talking to me about they were using a social media company which I had never heard of, and they were paying them $500 a month to do posting for them. And I was looking at the posts, and the posts weren't that bad, but the problem was there was almost no engagement with the posts that this company was posting for them. And what I thought was really interesting was that they had, every couple of days, they had a post in the office of a baby, because it was a pediatric practice, or a team member with a patient, no cavity club or something. And those posts were getting enormous engagement by people. Okay, the picture of the Christmas parties, and I said to the dentist, I said, look, take the $500 that you're spending, give it to a team member in the office to take who can use some extra money and say, you're in charge of the genuine content that you have in your practice, photos of stuff, and start posting for us, rather than spend money with a company when you're getting no engagement. And he was like, I think that's a really good idea. And he canceled with that company and immediately saw a huge dramatic difference in the content they were getting, or the engagement they were getting on their social media posting. So I think that's a huge point, is you can't just hire a company who's going to do what I would call disingenuine posts. They have to be genuine. They have to come from something that takes place in the office. So if they're miles away somewhere else, they're not going to get you anything for your social media.
Absolutely. And I think what happens often is, with healthcare workers, we are a little bit shyer because we're just used to, working in people's mouths and taking good care of people. And social media can actually do that for your patients as well. It can add value to them tremendously. It's not a narcissistic play. Yes, we see people use it narcissistically all the time, and that kind of gives us the icks. And that's not what we want for our own social media. We want to make sure that we are using it as a tool to elevate our patient care. So you can be using it as a tool to educate in between. That content can be recycled into newsletters that you're sending out. And the more you get your team involved, the better, because then it showcases, again, that lack of narcissism. You're actually trying to showcase the talent that your team brings to the table to elevate that patient care. And your team would love to be part of it. It doesn't have to be all on the owner's shoulders to do this at all. If you can involve the team and have them talk about what inspires them, how they elevate patients' care with what they do, that is really amazing for patients to witness as well, because then they really see that you back up your team. You're willing to put them into the spotlight and highlight what they actually bring to the table for care as well.
Got it. So how do you think practices can take their credibility to the next level, or take their credibility into the marketplace with social media?
What I would say is really figure out what you're passionate about and what kind of care you want to be providing. Again, trying to be everything to everyone isn't a great tactic. It's an easy out. It's like doing generic content. But if you are, let's say you're focused on a niche like sleep apnea, your content should be highlighting that. And you have a choice in what people see. You have a choice in the story that you're telling about your practice. So figure out what that story is, and then everything should be pointing towards that North Star of your story. So if it is that niche of sleep apnea, everything that you do drives to that. And you can be showcasing photos of your team, you can be showcasing photos inside and outside the practice, but they all come back to the metaphor of what you're actually doing in the practice. So you're holistically showing what your practice is about while still keeping on point. And you can transform your credibility in the marketplace by highlighting what you really want to be doing and what you're spending more time studying in, what you're trying to focus your practice on, because jacks of all trades are not what a lot of people are seeking these days. They want those experts who have, put in the extra hours, they've given the pound of flesh to actually educate themselves and elevate their knowledge in the marketplace and to be able to serve their patients at a higher level. And that's very attractive to a patient, especially if they have a problem that no one else has been able to solve. If they can go to your social media and see that this is what you do day in and day out, even if it's not, but that's what you're highlighting on your social media to try and attract more of those patients, that comes across really well to an audience of people who are trying to seek out the care that you can provide.
No, I actually agree with that. I always tell the story. I had a patient that came in. He actually is a makeup artist, and he's on TV. And he had gone to a dental practice, and they placed a horrible, horrible temporary crown in his mouth, and he couldn't go on TV because he looked terrible. It was horrible. The wrong color. It was really bad. And he came into my office, and I said, "How did you hear about my office?" He goes, "Instagram." And I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." He goes. And he told me something that still sticks with me now a couple years later. He said, "Dr. Tao, I have to be honest with you. I followed you on Instagram because I loved your content. And then you started not posting anymore. Okay. And I felt because you weren't posting anymore, you weren't relevant. And I decided to go elsewhere." And then he realized that I started posting again. So for that time that I wasn't posting, he thought, even though I was getting reviews and all these other things, I ignored posting in this one important, social media page that he happened to be following, and he thought we weren't relevant anymore because we were doing that. So that has stuck with me very much so. And so I like to tell that story because I listen to what patients tell me. Patients who tell me about the reviews. That's why reviews were really important to me, because patients said they read them. Well, this guy is looking at what we're posting on Instagram, and it made a big point in him making decisions about my practice. So I like telling that story when we talk about social media, because it means a lot when the patients are telling me they're making decisions based on what we as a dental practice are posting online.
Yeah, and there is a big question mark in people's minds if suddenly your social media is turned off, because they're like, are they closed temporarily? What is going on? And, if you don't, they want to see that engagement. If they've been following it and they like the content, then suddenly it's like you shut the door on the relationship and now they want to go somewhere else to actually get that connection. So it's interesting how that actually feeds into their perception of the practice. So love that story.
Speaking of getting things noticed, how do you think the best way to get content noticed on social media?
There's lots of different tactics, but the best one is to actually be engaging back with people, right? So again, it's not a narcissistic play. It has to be a two-way street. So we don't want to just be collecting people into our audience. We actually need to connect with them. So get conversations going. Someone goes on and likes your stuff, go in and send them a private message and start a conversation as to what is going on in their world. And when people see that, especially if they're perceiving it that the dentist is engaging with them, that's unusual, right? It's like when we used to give out a cell phone to a patient after hours, they're like, "What? I get your cell phone?" So if they actually are seeing on social media that you're actually the one engaging with them too, or it's one of the team members that they're going to be able to see, that is a completely different experience than just letting people like and comment on your stuff and then they never get anything back. And as you're trying to build your audience, if you go, let's say with Instagram, you go and look at who are your ideal type of people, you can find those people on Instagram in your area and you can go and start interacting with their stuff. Show them that you're giving some love, then they're more likely to give you some love back as well. And they're more likely to come on and start following you. People kind of want that exchange of engagement back and forth. And so if you can be doing that, that's going to attract more people to get interested in what you're doing, because they don't want to just be like one-way street. I only like your stuff and then they never get any engagement back. The world has changed with social media. They don't want to just be witnessing it anymore. They actually want to have a two-way conversation and actually get connection with the people that they are interested in. And, it's like in the olden days, it was Hollywood. If you met an actor or something that you admired on a movie and they gave you the time of day to actually like shake your hand or something, you would be elated for days. And so the same thing is happening with social media, but we have these like micro celebrities, and you can become one of those people as well, that people they're starting to like, they're starting to know, they're starting to trust. And when they actually get that two-way conversation going, it is one of those kind of fan moments where they go, wow, I can't believe they took the time to talk to me.
Well, that actually, it's funny what you just said here too. So I don't know if I've ever told this story. So I am a gigantic fan of Shark Tank. Okay, it's called Dragon's Den in Canada, but I'm a huge fan of Shark Tank. I mean, when I'm on the road, I will watch CNBC and watch reruns all day long. I mean, that's what I do. I love that show. I've learned a lot of business tactics from it. So I was actually in the Las Vegas airport, and Kevin Harrington, who was one of the original Sharks, he's makes all the infomercials. He was in the same car as I was heading to the terminal. And I introduced myself to him. I said, you know what? I know you hear this all the time, but I absolutely love you. I love your show. And I started chatting with him, and he actually invited me to sit down and have lunch with him. And we shared a pizza at whatever the pizza store is, California Pizza Kitchen at the Las Vegas airport. He spent an hour and a half of his time while we were waiting for our flight. And he gave me his business card. We chatted. He said, reach out to me if you ever need anything. I mean, I was like starstruck. I never thought that he would, a busy guy like that would ever want to talk to someone like me who was more of just a giddy, fan. But that's why when you said that, it kind of brought that back to me. Like, that's what it's like online sometimes. I was just talking to Shireen Washington, who was at Smiles at Sea. And I went up to her and I told her that I wanted to interview for the podcast. And she said that she was starstruck by me. And I'm like, why would you be starstruck by me? She goes, because I see you all over the internet. I see your face everywhere. People talk about you. I'm like, they call me Facebook famous. I mean, I don't look at myself like that, but it's very interesting when people think of you in that light. I'm just a regular guy. But, it's very interesting when you bring up something like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So one of the questions I also have, which I get a lot, is how is the best way, and it's not on one of the things we wanted to talk about, but I'm sure you have expertise in this as well, is how is the best way to get followers? Paying for them or having a company add them from a foreign country does you no good. Okay, unless you're trying to build your Instagram following and get paid for doing stuff and show you have all these people, that's the only way that helps. But you need people who are going to potentially come in as a patient to your office. So what is the best way to build the followers that you have from a local level?
Again, like what we talked about at the beginning, profiling your people that you want to become patients. Those are the people you want to go after, because the algorithms are getting stickier and stickier and more stringent on how many people you can engage with, how many people you can follow, how many people you can even have to start a conversation with. And so you have to get more and more, really narrow your focus on who you want to go after. You don't try and go after everyone because you're going to waste your effort. So who are those top 20% in your practice or that you want in your practice that are those ideal patients, and then go and figure out where they are. And again, go and start commenting on their stuff. Go and start conversations with them, and you will find they will reciprocate. If you're using LinkedIn, it's really nice because you actually get to the person. Sometimes on Instagram and whatnot, you're not really sure who's managing someone's account, especially if they're someone who's putting a lot of content out. They probably have someone else who's actually managing their content. But on LinkedIn, you're typically getting to the person behind the account. And when you start that conversation with them, that's a great way to get them to start following you, to get them wanting to engage with your content as well. I find, like, I have about 30 conversations a day on LinkedIn, and I'll find the people that I've back and forth with, even if it's just a couple of messages, suddenly I see them actually going and commenting on my stuff, then they set up a call with me. Now, I know I'm not in practice anymore, but the same thing works with dental practices as well. The more that you engage with people, the more they're likely to turn into a patient. And, just have real conversations with them. You don't have to be sales pitchy about it. How's everything going? You would be surprised at what people will tell you when you ask them that question. They'll open up their hearts to you because people are so looking for connection. And if they feel that connection online, when they actually get to come to your practice and meet you, they already feel like they know you, which is kind of weird, but it is the way that it is. They feel like they already have that connection with you. And when you are that real person that they saw on social media and you're that same person in person when they're at your practice, then you've made that bond for life, and they're likely to get on board with anything that needs to be done. They're likely to trust you with their care and want to become a patient for the long term.
Yeah, that's actually very true. I tell patients all the time that I'm uber responsive. I want to be I don't want to say at their beck and call because that's not right, but I will get back to someone as quickly as I can because that's the type of customer service I want. And I tell people that, and some of them have called me and I've gotten right back to them. They say, you're exactly like you say you are. I think that's really important to be true to yourself. because I think it works really well to get patients to decide to become your patients, and you, their dental care provider, obviously. So another question I get a lot, and you actually wanted to touch base on this one, which I think is a good question, is, I think for some practitioners, using social media is uncomfortable. Putting themselves out there. Like, I'm 100% comfortable talking about business. I have a Facebook group with 3,000 people. I put stuff out there all the time. Personally, for me, I don't like putting personal stuff on my personal Facebook page. I don't like that. My dad is going through some medical issues. My sister is all about that. She puts stuff about him all the time. I don't do that. So I think some healthcare practitioners are uncomfortable putting stuff out there even though in their own business. So how can somebody become more comfortable doing that? I mean, is that something that you help them with? Do you have any tips or suggestions for that?
Yeah, well, one of the first places I ask people to think about when it comes to creating content is think about the questions that you're getting asked on a regular basis in your practice, right? What are those questions that you're answering day in and day out? And if you can start paying attention to that and pay attention to how you answer it, and then try to be able to answer it the same way on camera, because the camera changes things. I work with people who have been speaking for 30 years and we put a camera in their face and suddenly they're like, oh, I have to be perfect. And they get really boring and really static on camera. And so we need to be able to portray who we are on the camera. And I think when you can just be who you are and step off that pedestal of perfection that we have in the dental world, that is going to allow you to get more comfortable on camera. And it's going to take practice. For a lot of people, it almost takes them a year of regularly getting on camera to actually be able to just be who they are. And have your team listen to what you're actually producing. Are you talking on camera the same way you would talk to a patient? And if you're not, then you got to do it again. And sometimes it helps to have someone on the other side of the camera that you can be looking at through the camera to help you to pretend that you're talking to them instead of talking to the camera, because it's awkward to sit in a room by yourself and just try and create stuff. But if you try and also think of it like, again, this is not a narcissistic tactic. You're doing this to elevate your patient care. So what can you be putting out there that's going to help them? It's not about you telling the world how amazing you are and how much you know. It's giving them the information that they need to make good decisions, to understand what their options are. And that can be done through video, that can be done through before and afters, that can be done through behind the scenes of showcasing how things work. But there's lots of ways to be serving your patients through your social media so that you don't feel like you're in that narcissistic position.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about being on video. I can be in front of audiences left and right. I can talk. And when you put a camera in front of my face, I'm still not the most comfortable in front of a camera. You can't see, but I have a YouTube studio right here. I have a DSLR here, a digital camera with lights and everything else. And I'm doing YouTube videos, and I'm just not as comfortable. This is comfortable for me here. But when trying to talk to a camera by myself, I'm always eating my words, and I've been doing it a long time, and I still can't get out of that uncomfortable feeling. It's weird. It just is really strange. But that's really, really good information. So, people are using social media, obviously, to bring new patients in. I mean, that's ultimately the goal, okay? Yeah. Yes, it's to create content. Yes, it's to create a following. But ultimately, people want to bring new patients in or new clients into their business. How do you see social media playing a role in that?
Well, how I see it is if you're actually showcasing what you're about and people are getting good information, when the time is right, if they've been following you and you're giving them the information that they need to solve their problem, when the time is right, you're the person that they're going to want to come to, right? Because you've been very generous with how you've been putting information out there. And you can be you want to keep track of obviously what you're getting from your social media, because it's a lot of effort to create content. You're putting out 10 pieces of content a month. It's not a 10-minute investment in your month. You have to be putting some thought into it. So keep track of what your patients are saying and ask them, have you noticed that we've been putting this stuff out on social media? If they have a problem, refer them to a video that you put out on social media. So you can keep driving them to the social media to get that education component for their care, and then track, how much of that is turning into case acceptance. Can you be using those videos as well that you're creating and put them into little newsletters that you send out when someone is like, oh, I'm interested in X, Y, or Z? You can send them some little videos that chase them to showcase how you can actually help them. And that can drive back to the social media thing. Organic is a funny thing because, you're going to have people interacting with it and they may not really mention it. Whereas an ad, we have a tracking, often we have a UTM parameter that will be tracking it, but you can be using UTM parameters as well with your social media. If you're linking it back to your website, put a tracking code into the link to your website and use a different one for your Instagram, use a different one for your LinkedIn, use a different one for your Facebook, and even for the types of content that you're putting out there, put a tracking link for that so that you can track, this is the kind of content that is actually getting people to click on the website and come to the practice. So there's ways we can be tracking. It's getting smarter than it used to be. Before it was just kind of like throw things out there and hope something sticks that gets a patient in. But now we have more science behind what we're doing to actually analyze what is working and what's not.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of people listening here who are using social media companies that are basically providing the same thing to everyone. We'll call it generic social media content. And there's some well-known companies out there that are doing that, and they think that posting just something is better than nothing. But that can be harmful in some ways. So why do you think posting generic content can be harmful to a practice?
Because it doesn't differentiate you at all. People get to know nothing about you. Again, like that tooth with little bunny ears for Easter tells nothing about your practice at all. It's just a placeholder. And if you're not willing to put yourself out there, and I'm not saying you have to display your whole life on your social media, but you have to give people a glimpse into what your practice is about, who your team is, what makes them tick, and what makes your practice tick to be able to continue moving forward, to want to serve your patients. That's where people really start to feel that connection. And connection has become a bigger thing than ever because of the pandemic. So many people, like if you look at Canada's pretty locked down right now. So people are seeking to actually feel connected to something. And if they don't feel that, they're less likely to come to your practice. And the generic stuff, it stops them in their tracks because, again, you might have some great stock photography, but what does that stock photography tell you about the practice? What does that logo plastered on there with some generic copy tell you about the practice? It tells you nothing. And it actually looks like you're hiding behind that instead of being willing to showcase who you are and just be like, this is who I am. If you like me, come to my practice. If you don't, go somewhere else, right? But it takes bravery to actually step forth and actually be authentic on social media and showcase why you do what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, I always say that boring content's boring. It doesn't matter what it's just boring. I always like to say that. There's this cartoon I always like to refer to that boring is boring. If you're boring, people aren't going to listen to you. Someone who's listening to this episode, they're a new practice. They're just starting in social media. How do you recommend that someone? I know we talked about they have to pick their demographics, they have to pick what sites they are. But how do you recommend that somebody says, okay, I want to get involved? What do I do? How do I do it? What's your recommendation there?
Come up with a plan first. Don't just hop in. A lot of people recommend you just got to start. And I actually say, take a step back and actually start figuring out what your brand is about. Are you trying to be a high-level practice? Are you trying to be a mid-range? Are you trying to be a basic practice? And what do you actually stand for? What makes you tick? Do you wake up in the morning excited to pull teeth, or are you excited to do root canals? Right? And figure out what it is that makes you tick. Find out from your team what makes them tick. And then start building content around that. And figure out 3 big things that you're going to talk about, or 3 big categories that you're going to talk about in the year. And the 3 that I recommend, I mentioned them before, is like go into the frequently asked questions, go into behind the scenes, showcasing, how you guys do what you do. People love to see how things tick. And then also show them before and afters. But also make it aligned with what your practice is really about. And then, if everything is pointing in the right direction, it's really easy for people to understand what you're about. It's also far easier for you to create content. Because if you're going helter-skelter and you're like, I have no plan, I just know I need to record something, you're going to record something probably out in left field that is going to be off-brand. It's not going to serve your patients in the way that it could if it was better planned out. So make that map for the year. It can be dynamic. It's the situation we saw in the last year. The world can change very quickly. And so you have to be able to adjust for it. But at least if you have that overarching plan, it's going to help you to want to get out there and feel more comfortable doing it. And, get your team to weigh in on it. Even get your patients to weigh in on it. Ask them, what do they want to hear from you? And I know that can be really humbling because we're supposed to be a doctor. We're supposed to be on this pedestal, right? But our patients would love to help us to do better, especially if they are raving fans of our practice. They would love to contribute and help you to find more of those right people. And you're doing the social media for them. It's 100% about serving them. It's not about serving you at all. So find out how they want to be served. What kind of content do they want? What do they want to see? And get them to, you can easily just send out a survey and ask questions, and you'd be surprised at how many people will answer back and try to give you guidance.
That's really good advice. How important do you think actual video is versus, photos? I mean, in terms of the content that you're producing.
I really do push towards heavy on the video content. So I recommend doing one video a month or one video a week. So do four videos per month and then 6 pieces of other content. And in those videos, that's where you're serving your patients. You're giving them educational content about how something can actually change their life, how it can actually elevate their health. And then the rest of it, you can be filling in with photos that have metaphors about that stuff, or even it describes that in even more depth. And all that stuff contributes again to that body of knowledge of serving your patients. Taking pictures of your food at lunch, probably not the best use of your content. I know it can be easy to do that, and it showcases a little bit behind the scenes, but I'd rather you focus on serving your patients, giving them exactly what they need to make the best decisions in your practice, to know that you are the practitioner that really is for them because of how generous you are with giving them knowledge when they haven't even paid you to actually sit in your chair and have a conversation with you.
Gotcha. So I know that I like this doing the pod decks and the would you rather questions, but before we do that and you then would provide your contact information for people to reach out to you, because I think you're absolutely a star when it comes to social media. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to mention to the audience?
Probably the one thing I want to point out is if you're going to start actually putting yourself out there, just know that the first 90 days are probably going to suck. You're not going to get the engagement that you want. You're going to get in your head that the stuff you're saying is dumb and that nobody should be listening to you, and you might feel like you're going to run out of ideas. Once you get past that 90 days, it is going to be easier. It's like developing new habit. So just know that you do have a mountain to climb, and if you need help with climbing that mountain, I'm always happy to hop on a call as well, just to help give you some ideas to get through that, and then you'll usually be on your way after the 90 days.
That's really good advice. I have one last question. How much is too much content?
It's going to depend on your audience. Take a look at the science of what is happening. So what I find is for most people, 10 pieces of content a month is great. So do 2 one week, 3 the next week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, and keep repeating that. It's a pretty easy pace to maintain. It keeps you in people's faces on a regular basis. And if you find that you want to do more, see if the numbers actually show that it's actually giving you benefit, because the more you put out there, the more work it is, the more management there is to it as well. So you want to make sure that you're finding that balance of effort in, giving you reward out.
And one more question is, do you think they should work off a content calendar?
Yeah, developing a content calendar where you know what has to get posted and what's going to get posted with it is very, very helpful. And also outlining what you think that's going to look like on a month-to-month basis is going to help you to keep things congruent with your brand and consistent with the effort that you're putting out there. And in dentistry, we're very organized people, so we do well when we have a structure to work with instead of just random chaos. If it feels like we don't know what we're going to be doing, we're probably not going to do it. So the content calendar absolutely can help get that organized.
Perfect. That was great. All right, let's switch the gears a little bit. I'm going to shuffle my deck. I'm going to ask you 10 would you rather questions. Again, for those that have not heard this before, nothing inappropriate. I'm not going to embarrass Angela. So these are all appropriate questions. So Angela, when I ask you it, just give a reason why and your answer, okay?
Okay.
So would you rather be single for a year, this includes no dating, or go on bad dates for a year straight?
I would rather be single for a year, just to end up focusing on having an adventure where I can be present through the whole thing.
All right, here's somewhat dental related. Would you rather have your jaw wired shut for a year, drinking only out of a straw, or wear an eye patch for a year?
I think I'd probably rather have my jaw wired shut.
Okay. Here's another dental one. It's just the way the cookie crumbles here. Would you rather pull your own tooth with a pair of pliers or brand yourself with a cattle prod?
Probably pull my own tooth.
Okay. Would you rather be able to record your thoughts or your dreams while you're asleep?
I'd rather record my thoughts because I feel like I have lots of amazing ideas that come to me in my sleep and then they disappear.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. Would you rather have long nose hair or long ear hair?
I think ear hair because I could just pull my curls over top of it.
Yeah. And you don't want to attract with your nose ring there, so that wouldn't look so good. Okay. Would you rather be forced to high five everyone you make eye contact with, or would you rather strike up a conversations with at least 5 strangers per day?
I think I'd rather high five people. I'm quite an introvert, so the random conversations would be challenging.
All right. Would you rather have your face printed on money or your name, or your small town named in your honor?
Small town named in my honor.
Okay. Would you rather take cold showers for the rest of your life or never get more than 4 hours of sleep ever again?
I would take cold showers over lacking sleep.
Cold showers, yes. Okay. I need to sleep too, but I don't like cold showers either. That's a tough one for me. Okay. So this is one I'll ask because you're a speaker, and I think speakers like this one. Would you rather fart in an elevator full of strangers or belch loudly while giving an important presentation?
I think I'd rather fart in the elevator.
That's what I would do too. That's what most of the speakers say. So, and this one I ask everyone because I'm curious, because I'm a tech guy. Would you rather never to be able to use your search engines again, or never use your smartphone apps again?
I'd be okay without the smartphone apps. The searching and being able to look things up is such a beautiful tool. Can't give that up.
Yep, a lot of people can't give up their search engines. That's how we're so involved with search engines, where we search for everything nowadays. So, thank you for being a good sport.
My pleasure.
So, Angela, let people know how they can get a hold of you if they want some help with social media. How can they get assistance from you?
You can reach out to me through info@unleashinginfluence.com. My assistant Arlene rules my world through that email. And if you want to check out the website to see what we do for people, it's www.unleashinginfluence.com.
Perfect. Guys, Angela, first off, I want to thank you. I'm super impressed by your knowledge. I'm super impressed with your poise. I love your dancing. I mean, if you have a chance to see Angela dance, she's amazing. She'll blow your mind. If you ever get a chance to see her speak, she'll also, blow you what she can do. But Angela, thank you for joining me today. Guys, if you like this episode, please reach out. Please listen to the episode. Please share it. Don't forget, if you want to unleash your authentic brand, as Angela likes to say, please don't hesitate to reach out to Angela. I know she'll be helpful to you. Like the episode, subscribe to the episode. Make sure you go to iTunes or any of the other podcasting networks and subscribe so you get the episodes. They come out every Friday afternoon at 1 p.m., just so you guys know. And as I always like to say as we conclude these episodes, remember, your reputation matters. Thanks again for joining me. Angela, thanks again for being part of the episode, and we'll talk to you guys soon.